The body is a field with infinite possibilities of internal movement. It's like a swarm of 360 joints. But what we normally feel when we move, because we feel movement through proprioception, goes down to tissues and cells and the molecular field. So it's really spread in the entire field of the body. This is what I claim as the possibility for an internal freedom of movement. We normally think freedom of movement towards outside, like the possibility to move through space, across countries and so forth. But there's an even deeper kind of internal freedom of movement that one can explore, for instance, when one is confined, like humanity is nowadays with the pandemic. One can do this in a prison, like we can do today in our home prisons, and we can thus also resist the ubiquitous and pervasive digital prison of our mobile devices that are tracking our movement all the time. We can develop a richer way of moving that counteracts the millennia-old tendency to impoverish our movement, aligning our movement so that it becomes increasingly measurable. So I suggest then to take a look and expand to this internal freedom of movement. It's a radical freedom of movement because it has endless possibilities and it can be anywhere, anytime, based on the idea that even if you pretend to be still, the body will always be fluctuating. So fluctuation, which is on the one hand the motor of the universe, like following quantum field theories, vacuum fluctuation is the inevitable state of any vacuum in the universe, or even before the universe started, primordial fluctuations. The entire universe is an expression, an unfolding of fluctuation, and our field of movement also is a beautiful, extraordinary expression of fluctuation. So the body is fluctuating all the time, that you want it or not. You can pretend to be still, but you won't be still. Now we can start looking at the multiplicity of levels, if you want to call it, of movement that the body has. We will see how the idea of displacement arrives at the very end, in the very last of the different fields and scales of movement I'm going to talk about. The first one that you can listen into and explore if you pretend to be still is made of already an enormously complex field of internal fluctuations. Some of them are molecular, and so you won't feel them directly, but you can sometimes feel overall effects of it, even at bacterial levels, viral levels, molecular levels. Like when you have a cold, you feel bacteria moving inside, or gastrointestinal movements and so forth. You have involuntary movements of breathing, of the heartbeat and the blood pressure. You have all sorts of movements that have to do with reflex movements of independent, decentralized nervous networks. So the nervous system is an incredible decentralized network made of multiple subnetworks that swarm in more or less independent manner. Some of them can, of course, then act in a coordinated manner, in a centralized manner, but they have loads of decentralized movements. So there are many reflex movements that happen all the time. If you're now sitting, explore the multiplicity of reflex movements in your body. That's an entire realm in itself. Now, because the matter of the body is constantly fluctuating, there will be sometimes noticeable micro readjustments of posture. Something releasing in the neck, the breathing that readjust the chest. You will feel the tingling of pressures, the feet that are fluctuating as well, or the contact with the armchair, sofa, or the floor. You will feel the caress of the clothes all over the body. That's a sign that it's all fluctuating. You have tiny, tiny caresses of the clothes happening everywhere because the whole body is fluctuating. So the caress of the clothes is a wonderful way to start listening into this self-organizing feel that the body is. Now, if we zoom up into a next, more noticeable level, we can start focusing on actual muscular tensions that are happening everywhere. If we hold a posture, there will be a multiplicity of torsions and tensions. And I think the body is always, say, out of balance. It's not that the body is necessarily striving for balance, it's always holding together multiple tensions. Imagine you're like kind of lying down. Well, the body will be holding multiple tensions at the same time. We are not yet accelerating. There's no gesture involving accelerations in a strict sense now. It's a tensional, torsional field, kind of elastic field that can deform endlessly, and you will feel tensional zones in between the 360 joints, so that the body, without reaching accelerations, can be constantly readjusting the infinity of its tensions and torsions. And then you can bring in accelerations, and they can be multiple at the same time. So every tiny part of the body can have its own rhythmic independence. It's a polyrhythm of the body. So multiple accelerations can be decentering or remobilizing without a center the body at the same time. It's like a fugue with many voices. So we were starting with a kind of micropolyphony of blurry sensations distributed all over the place, which have no clear voice, so to speak. We are now starting to define a kind of melodies. It's like a Baroque fugue with multiple voices that have their own, well, counterpoint of rhythms and multiplicity, but they move on their own, so to speak. So we're trying to leave the controlling subject out of the picture all the time. Right? This will come only, we will see later how it comes, eventually. And then out of this swarm of accelerations that is coming up from other levels that we were looking at, there might be vectors that take over, and then that will become a displacement as one vector from this multiplicity of the fluctuating field of the body dominates at some point, and then that becomes the vector of a displacement. And the intentionality might be coming actually after the fact, as the body flocks in that direction. But even as it moves in that direction, it will keep fluctuating in all the other levels that we have been looking at. So this is just a quick look at the enormous complexity of the flocking complexity of the body, what I call the proprioceptive swarm, because the kind of core matrix in which this is all happening and felt, because it is felt, is through the sense of proprioception, the sense of internal movement of the body, which is also where all other sensing modalities, vision, hearing, everything else, gets integrated in always new ways in our experience and in our capacity to move. So experience is always, every single experience is a peculiar and changing combination of sensing modalities, but I think it comes together in a meaningful way in proprioception as also the sense of movement, and where we can activate, or the body activates its capacity to move as a kind of never-ending, swarming, self-organizing capacity that we have acquired throughout 4 billion years of self-organizing bacterial swarms in evolution. So I claim that we have this self-organizing plasticity down in the memories of our tissues and nervous system. It's time to claim it back and unleash it. So if we every day improvise a bit, listening to all these different levels of the body and letting them move without trying to control, it can evolve in endless rhythms, in plastic rhythms. If we try to control it, we will inevitably bring in kind of this reductive idea of the displacement and the trajectories. And if you control, you normally will project an already existing predictions, so you won't probably be able to let the body unfold in new ways. So I recommend, it's not about mindfulness, all these exercises, it's bodyfulness, what I propose. Not mindfulness, bodyfulness, over fullness of a body that is absolutely irreducible to any kind of mind-centric approach of control. It's not about becoming conscious and aware, that's just the starting point, listening, letting the body swarm around, and you will all realize that you can always capture just a tiny bit of what's going on. But you let that take over, you let that more broad and full experience take over, and let the body mobilize its swarming power, its BI, its body intelligence, which is what I propose for a true revolution and evolution, rather than the control dystopia of AI, artificial intelligence. So this is my suggestion. We will keep expanding on it in other workshop capsules for unleashing this internal freedom of movement. Let's remember now, so the last part we were having was this vector of displacement, which is just when one vector comes out from this flocking field. Then we had this multiple accelerations that can happen in the body at the same time. Then we had the tensional field without accelerations, which for me is the most interesting. It's like the core part of feeling proprioception and letting it unfold without a gravitational center, just tensional zones stretching in between, in endless varying zones in between the flocks of 360 joints. Imagine a flock of birds, but the real movement is in between the birds, right? As if they were bound by elastics that are shifting all the time. And then we get to the molecular level, the involuntary level, the little reflex movements that happen all the time. The saliva, the breathing, the throat, the heartbeat and the heart and the blood pressure, reflex movements, tiny readjustments of the entire fluctuation of the matter of the body, molecular movements that swarm up and you feel the tingling, you feel something happening somewhere, and that unleashes a change in the whole. When you do this improvisation on a daily basis, and it can acquire all sorts of dynamics, you can suddenly, in the middle of a quicker movement, zoom in into the smaller part. Maybe stand still and then feel the fluctuation going on there, and realize that in every tiny part of the body some new change can be unleashed that transforms the whole. You can even focus just on one part, just at maybe a zone configuration that can vary in a particular way. Some tiny fluctuations in the hand, how that can vary and how that can then expand in the rest of the body. You can choose a posture and feel its configurations, I call it, its multiple fluctuations around the posture, and stay there for a whole session maybe, or then let it unfold in another configuration and then explore the fluctuations around that configuration and the different dynamics that that can take. Or zoom again, stillness and reflex movements. So the body is like a metafractal field. I say metafractal because when you zoom into its detail, its micro dances, its microscopic parts, it's never following a geometrical reducible pattern. It's always irregular, so it goes down to vacuum fluctuations in every atom of every protein folding in the cytoskeletons of our cells, which is what we actually feel when we contract. Well, we feel the proprioceptors, but what's going on is that billions of cells are contracting, so the cytoskeleton of the cell is this prodigious architecture of proteins. The proteins are these prodigious molecules that fold. So every time we fold a muscle, it's like a flock of trillions of molecules folding together. So we connect really when we feel our muscles with a deep molecular, almost subatomic level, but also with the biosphere, with the cosmos, with everything around us, with the radiation from the sun, with the temperature. We feel in the body molecular changes from the surroundings, from the air pressure, all sorts of things. right? So proprioception is this molecular field of the body whose fluctuations connect us with everything outside and towards the inside. We will continue exploring it in future lectures or workshops.